All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today is day 4 of the IMA for Beginners series, and we will be covering maintenance in IMA today. I am recording today's webinar, and I will send the link out, if not later today, then tomorrow. So if you could test out the chat feature, let me know which maintenance tasks do you struggle with the most. So for example, it could be changing dimensions, cost changes. So what maintenance tasks do you struggle with the most? Maybe adding new cartons, adding new vendor packs. So I'll come back to those answers in a couple of slides. I did go ahead and mute everybody since we've had a few issues with the background noise. I will unmute everyone at the end of the presentation, so if you would like to audibly ask questions at the end, you will be able to do that. Feel free to submit questions at any time using the chat feature. And I did ask what maintenance tasks you struggle with the most. So far from the responses that I see, it looks like most people are just brand new to IMA and don't have any experience yet with maintenance. So that's okay. We're going to cover some stuff today that you may find useful for the types of maintenance you may need to do for your business. On Monday, we covered the basics and terminology. Tuesday was setting up new items. Yesterday, we covered some IMA features that were offered. And today, we're going to be focusing on specific types of change requests and tasks. So the purpose of this session is to provide an overview of maintenance tasks that may need to be completed in IMA. After completing the session, you will be able to demonstrate how to add a new carton and or vendor pack to an existing item, demonstrate how to update ship points and assign different ship points to different DC locations when needed, and identify the available options to update UPCs and dimensions and weights. So the topics we're covering today are UPC changes, carton configuration changes, new cartons, new vendor packs, ship point changes, and dimensions and weight changes. So first we have UPC changes. So my item is operational with the incorrect UPC. How do I fix it? The answer to that depends on your buyer. You should reach out to your buyer and find out if they need the same KSN. If they require the same KSN, then inventory is actually going to have to strip the UPC and put the correct one back on. So that means that your inventory analyst will take care of that. If the buyer does not require the same KSN, then you should sync over a new carton with data sync. So any questions on UPC changes? Okay, next we're going to talk about carton configuration changes. So there are a couple of reasons that you might want to update carton configurations. It could be that the original carton setup is incorrect, or perhaps the original one was correct and maybe there are already orders out on it, but your inventory or merchant, they want additional carton assortment options. You would need to create a new carton for that new assortment option. So the process differs depending on whether it's in process or operational. If your item is still in process and it's the incorrect original carton setup, then if it's already out of your role, you should have your merchant or inventory analyst return those items to you, and then you can correct those in a grid. You can bring them into the returned items grid. Once they become operational, if it's the incorrect setup, you can't just do a change request for it. You would have to sync over a new carton with the correct configuration. So if the item's operational, you just have to sync over a new carton with the correct configuration. And I am going to show you how to update an in-process item. So we're going to go to IMA here, and I'm going to bring up a new item grid. So when you're in the default view, because that's what's going to pull up, the default view does not show your package quantity because that is synced over with your data sync provider. So if you want to update your package configuration, you have to locate it on the tab that it lives on. So your package configuration lives on the Packages tab. So you would click your Package tab, and now you can see your member quantity right here. So this current carton is set up as a 222 carton. Let's say it was actually intended to be a 333 carton. It was actually supposed to be a 9-pack carton instead of a 6. So you would just enter that information, and then you could click Empty Required to get back to your default view and complete all those required fields. That's how you would update an in-process carton. And again, if it's already operational, you just have to sync over a new carton for your existing item. So are there any questions on carton configurations? Okay, well next we're going to talk about new cartons. There are several reasons that you may need new cartons for existing items. Could be, like we just talked about, there's a change in the carton configuration, or maybe a new vendor is going to be supplying an existing item. Or maybe you have promotional displays. That promotional display would need a new carton to be included with all of those eaches. So anytime you have a new carton, just remember that that new carton is going to require a new vendor pack as well. So the most common errors when adding a new carton is the UPCs match the incorrect quantity, the carton dimensions do not align with eaches. So for instance, if you have an existing configuration, let's say a 6-pack configuration, and then you are creating an additional 10-pack configuration, the dimensions and weights for that new 10-pack carton, they're going to have to be different than the 6-pack carton. Another common error is that vendor packs were not created for new exploding assortment members. So that really only pertains if you're creating the new cartons manually. If you're syncing over new cartons, that new vendor pack is going to automatically sync over with those new cartons. So new carton process. If you have each packages, each cartons, uniform cartons, and exploding assortment cartons, those should be synced over from your data sync provider. If you're using a data sync provider, you should not create these new cartons manually. New vendor packs are included when the new cartons are synced over, so then there's no need to manually create new vendor packs. If you are syncing over assorted cartons, mixed cartons, or pallet cartons, those cannot be synced over. Sorry, I think I said if you are syncing them, but I meant if you need new assorted cartons, mixed cartons, and pallet cartons. Those cannot be synced over. They do have to be built manually in IMA along with the corresponding new vendor pack. So I am going to show you how to manually add a new carton, both a new uniform carton and a new exploding assortment carton. There are those of you that maybe you never your vendor company has never switched over to data sync, or maybe there will be an instance where your data sync provider is down and you really need to get this new carton up and running in IMA, and you may not know how to do that. So I'm going to walk through those steps with you today. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is add a new uniform carton to an existing each. So we're going to type in the KSN number for the existing each and search. Then we are going to click the Packages tab. So right now this is just an each, and we're wanting to add a new uniform carton. So up here at the top you'll see this drop down. Uniform carton is selected by default, so we will leave that as is, and then we're going to click Add Package. This screen is going to display, and so the first thing you need to do is enter your shipping marking number. Let me grab that real quick. Okay. The division is selected by default. You do have to select your order duns. And you should actually have a drop down for your order duns. Since I'm set up as a super user, I have to actually search for it. Okay, so next you will see the SHC category is already selected for you. You just need to select the subcategory. And then you will click Add Package. So the single edit for the uniform carton will display. Here under package type, you can see the uniform carton is selected. So we are going to enter a name for this. Next, under members, you have to select the each that this uniform carton is directed to. So usually there's just going to be the one option, so we will select this right here because that's what we are doing the uniform carton for, and then you click Add. Your page will reload, and now you can enter in each quantity. We'll say that this is going to be a uniform carton of 10. From there, this is where you can enter your number of enters. And when you enter the number of enters and click Save, it's automatically going to update your eaches and eaches per enter accordingly. So let's say that this carton of 10 is going to have 2 enters. If you entered 2 and click Save, you see that it reloads. The total number of eaches is 10. Eaches per enter is 5, and then there's 2 enters. So there's 5 of these jeans in each of the enters. Now this does have to be divisible accordingly. So since this is a total quantity of 10, if you were to enter a number of eaches of 3, it will update it here, but it's not going to add up correctly. So 3 times 3 is 9, it's not 10. So when you go to the workflow to check for errors, you would get a hard error for this. So you do have to make sure this is appropriately divisible. So we are going to change this to 10 because we are not going to have any enters in this carton. We're just going to put the jeans in the carton. So there's 10 eaches, so that means there's 10 enters. So 10, 1, 10. Next, you have to enter the depth, width, and height for the carton. And the weight as well. And then we can click Save. And you can go to the Workflow tab. And we're going to check for errors. Okay, so I did get some errors. The first one is one that you should get at this point because you have to create a new vendor pack for this carton. Okay? So since we haven't created a new vendor pack yet, we have a package ID error. The message says a vendor pack must be created for this package. The next error we got is for depth. The field is depth. It says at least one dimension is empty. So you may have noticed, if you were paying attention, that I did not actually enter the weight field. So we're going to go back to the Packages tab. We're going to click into the shipping marking number of this uniform carton. We can tell that this one's in process because it can still be removed. Under the Action column, you see this blank square. If you wanted to, you could select this and you could click Remove. So that's how we know that this one is still in process, whereas the package above it, this each, is already operational because we cannot remove it. So again, we're going to click into that shipping marking number. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there it is. We can see that I left the weight blank. So I'm going to save that. Now, if I were to go back to Workflow and approve, the only error I should get at this point is the missing vendor pack, which we will come back to vendor packs in just a few slides. So the next thing I want to show you, so again, that's how you do a uniform carton. Just don't forget to create the vendor pack. So the next thing I want to show you is how to create an exploding assortment. So we're going to say that the eaches are already existing with a different exploding assortment carton configuration. And now your buyer is wanting you to create a new exploding assortment configuration. So you would come up here to create and hover over create, and then you would click exploding assortment. It's going to load this page, and the first thing you need to do is enter the shipping marking number for that new exploding assortment carton. Next, we are going to select the division. Wrong one. There we go. After that, you will select your order dones. And then from there, you select your SHC category, and then your subcategory. Then click Add Packages. Okay, so this page is going to display. It's asking if you're creating a carton or a pallet. We are creating an exploding assortment, so that would be a carton, so we'll leave the default selected. And we're going to click Create Package. Now we want to add a description. And then you can enter brand if you'd like to, but the brand is not actually required for cartons. So I'm going to leave that blank. And instead, I am going to go ahead and answer the EAS tag questions. Then you can click Save. It's going to display the single edit page for this new exploding assortment. Here we can see under package type, it says exploding assortment carton. On the right, you can see the description I entered. But under members, you'll see that there's no members listed. So we have to search for those members to add them. So you can click Search for Assorted Members, and it's going to open this new page. And then you can enter the KSNs. This is how I'm searching, just because I have the KSNs. Another way that you could search is you could search by KSN description. You could search by a specific marking number, or you could search by a specific vendor stock number. I think the vendor stock number may prove to be the most useful because you could bring back more than one answer in your search results and add them all at once. I just have the KSNs on me right now, so I'm adding these individually. You have to add them individually if you search by KSN. So once you select it, you can click Add Members. And I'm going to quickly add those other two KSNs as well. Okay, so now you can see I've added these three each KSNs to this new exploding assortment carton. Next thing we want to do is update the quantity, because right now it's just listed as 111. We're going to say that this is actually a configuration of 333. Now if you scroll further down the page, we will see again our dimensions and weights for our carton. So I'm going to go ahead and enter those as well. And then I'm going to click Save. So let's go to the Workflow tab. And I'm going to click Check for Errors. And the only error I should get, is the vendor pack error. And that's because I need to create a new vendor pack with any new cartons. So again, that's the section we're getting ready to go into, so we'll come back to this. All right, are there any questions about new cartons so far? Okay, we're going to move on to new vendor packs. My merchant or inventory analyst has requested that I create a new vendor pack for an existing item. Why would I need to create a new vendor pack? I know I touched on this Monday during the basics, so I'm not sure if you remember or not, but there are several reasons why you might need a new vendor pack. Some reasons for additional vendor packs could be that you have a new flow type. If your product has been being ordered through the DC flow and now your buyer wants you to create one for DSD, direct to store, then you would need a new vendor pack for that. You cannot do change requests for new flow types. You also cannot do change requests for additional store formats. So if your product has been sold in Kmart and they want to start selling it in Sears, you would have to do a new vendor pack for that new store format. Another reason is that there could be a different vendor supplying the item. Maybe vendor A has been supplying the product and now vendor B is going to start supplying the product instead. Or maybe it's a product such as the plastic water bottles, the disposable water bottles. We can't get the supply from a single vendor. We can't get enough from a single vendor to fill all of our supply, so we use multiple vendors for that. So each of those vendors would have to have their own vendor packs. Another reason you would need a new vendor pack, if you have a change in carton configurations, which can also go along with having a new each remember. And finally, if there's more than one cost. So if your product has been sold in the, let's say in the main 48 states, and we want to start selling it in Hawaii or Alaska, that's going to require a higher cost, so you would need a separate vendor pack. So the most common errors for new vendor packs are that the desired ship point is not available to select, the DUNS number is not set up for the correct format, or it's not set up for the correct flow. So if your DUNS number is not set up for the correct format or the correct flow, then you can email vendmain@searshc.com, and you'll have to go through part of the vendor onboarding to get that additional format or that additional flow added to your DUNS. And if your desired ship point isn't available, you'll have to do a request on the portal. And I have some directions on that in just a few slides. So the new vendor pack process. If you use data sync, the new vendor packs should be synced over with the existing UPC. Now if you added a new carton, then that is going to come over with the new vendor pack as well. But if you just need to add a new vendor pack, then sync it over with the existing UPC. If you set items up manually, then you have to add or duplicate a vendor pack from the vendor pack tab in IMA. And I am going to walk through that process as well. Alright, so we created this new exploding assortment carton, and now we need to add a new vendor pack. So we're going to go to the vendor pack tab, and we're going to click Add Vendor Pack. We're going to select the option from the Shipping Package dropdown, and then next we are going to select your DUNS. Alright, so once you select your DUNS, this page will refresh, and now you can select your flow type and your primary store format. So for our flow type, we are going to select DSD. And for our primary store format, we will select Kmart. Going further down, we now need to enter the cost. So remember, this is the cost for the carton. So for all of the eaches that are going to be in that carton, not the cost of the eaches. Then you can enter your vendor stock number, order quantity multiple, and the order quantity unit of measure. On the right side, you can use the calendar to select your projected first in-store date. And because we selected DSD, we do not have to select ship points. If you're shipping DSD, ship points are not required. You cannot enter them. So this is all the information we need to enter for your vendor pack. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And then we're going to go back to the Workflow tab and we're going to check for errors. And here we can see there's just a warning. Now if you get warnings, those can be completely ignored. You do not have to resolve warnings. So if all you get are warnings, you can go ahead and select the Approve Radio button, and then you can click Submit and Ignore Warnings. And there, you approved it. So that's how you add a brand new vendor pack. Now another option you have for adding vendor packs is duplicating vendor packs. So if you're going to duplicate a vendor pack, you're going to start on that vendor pack tab, and there already has to be at least one vendor pack on the item to duplicate. So we're going to click into the hyperlink of the vendor pack that we're wanting to duplicate. And then up at the top right, you can see Duplicate Vendor Pack. We're going to click that button. Now we can start entering information about the new vendor pack. So first I selected the store format. Now I am entering my DUNS. Once you've entered your DUNS, you can select your flow type and your primary store format. And then over to the far right, you may need to scroll over on your screen if you're on your laptop. You can select the package. Now, if you needed to add multiple vendor packs, let's say not only did you need a new flow type, but you also needed a vendor pack for another store format in addition to that new flow type, you could just continue down here, and let's say we're going to do Sears, and we can go through those same steps to create a Sears one as well. So you can add multiple vendor packs on this screen. There are 3 lines available to you, but you can click Add to add another line. So we're just going to duplicate this one. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create Duplicates. So that brings us back out to the vendor pack tab. So we still have to update some information on this duplicated vendor pack. So this is your new vendor pack. Again, you know it's new because you can select it here on the left, and you could edit this. You can actually delete this too when we go into the vendor pack. So I'm going into the vendor pack, and here, if you wanted to, if this was made an error, you could delete it. But you can see most of this information and copied over. You do have to update your projected first insert date because it just copies over the existing projected first insert date. If that projected first insert date is more than 90 days in the past, you will get a hard error when you try to approve it. So you want to make sure you update that. You also have to answer the California Prop 65 questions. So we're going to answer those, and then that's it really. Now, I do want to show you something. If you made changes and then you try to click off to go to the Workflow tab, you will get this message. So you know, normally when you're in applications like Microsoft Word or Excel, if you try to close out the application without saving it, it pops up and it asks you if you want to save your changes. So you click OK, and you do that by kind of default because that's how most applications behave. IMA is a little bit backwards. So this message is asking, do you want to continue without saving? So if you click OK by default, you'll actually lose all those changes you just did. So to save it, you actually have to click Cancel and then Save. So I do like to call that out because it's a little backwards from most of the applications you're used to working in. So once we've saved it, we're going to go to the Workflow tab, and again, you can check for errors. There's no errors, so you could go ahead and click Approve and Submit and Ignore Warnings. All right, any questions about adding new vendor packs manually? Okay, we will move on to new ship points then. So reasons for ship point changes could be that your shipping location has closed, or maybe you want to adjust the route for a better deal. So for example, if we have a DC location in Pennsylvania and California, and you have a warehouse in California and New Jersey, then you may want us to pick up the product from your New Jersey warehouse for our Pennsylvania DC, and from the California warehouse for our California DC. So the most common errors when changing a ship point, first is selecting the incorrect ship point. If you select the incorrect ship point, then we're going to send our trucks to the incorrect warehouse. It's going to get there, and there's not going to be any product ready for it to load. Maybe we sent the truck to your New Jersey warehouse because that's what was selected in IMA, but really you meant for us to go to your California warehouse. Another common error would be that the desired ship point is not available. So in other words, it's actually not available in the drop-down for you to select. If it's not available, you can submit a request through the vendor portal. So in the vendor portal, if you go to the IMA tab, you can click here under ship point changes. It'll load this form for you, and you can complete the form and click submit. Now just be aware that this update's not going to happen instantaneously. It does have to manually be added, so it may take a couple of days, and they will send you an email once the request has been completed. Alright, so we're going to go over how to change a ship point. And I'm actually going to skip over these slides because I'm going to go into the application and do it for you live. But you have those in the PowerPoint for you to reference. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, we're going to search for the KSN that we want to update. And the ship points are on the vendor pack, so we're going to click the vendor pack tab. Then we are going to click into the hyperlink of the vendor pack that we're wanting to update the ship points for. We're going to scroll down until you see the tier groups. Okay, so this is a Kmart item, or it's going through Kmart ordering, so it's going to say Kmart tier group, and it's the RSC tier group, and here's our DC locations. These are your ship points that are currently selected. So we want to change this information. So we're going to select this box right here. It says change DC locations, and then we're going to click create change request. Okay, so once you're on this page, if you're just changing to a different DC location overall, that's going to be applied to all of your, if you're changing your ship point, it's going to be applied to all of the DC locations, you can just select it here and click apply to all. It's going to come up with a confirmation message, and you can click OK. And then you could click save and go to next. However, let's say that you're wanting to choose different pickup locations for different DC locations. Then you would click this plus sign under the tier group section to explode that out. We're going to scroll down. So now you can see this is the Mira Loma, California DC location, and then the Chambersburg, Pennsylvania location. Currently, the Bayonne, New Jersey warehouse is selected as the ship point for both of these. But let's say we want to use the Carson, California warehouse as our ship point for our California DC. You would just select that from this menu here. So now we can see there's two different ship points selected for the different DC locations. So then you can click Save and go to Next. It's going to load the Workflow tab. And once it does that, you can select Approve and check for errors. It's going to come up with a warning, I think. Trying to scroll down. There we go. Yeah, so it's just a warning about the projected first insert date. Again, you can ignore warnings, so we're going to go ahead and click Submit and ignore warnings. and that's how you can update your ship points. So again, make sure if you do create a change request that you don't forget to actually approve it. So any questions about ship points? Okay, we're going to go ahead and talk about dimensions and weights again. So there are a couple of reasons why you might need to change your dimensions and your weights. It could be that your items are so old that they're wrong. Maybe they were initially entered correctly, but then the product packaging changed, and so now the dimensions and weights have changed. Or maybe they just weren't entered correctly in the first place. We didn't always have the dimensions and weight check on the items in IMA. That's only happened maybe in the last 5 years or so. So if an item is really old, it could have gone through with completely wrong dimensions and weights that didn't make sense with the carton. Another reason that you might want to change your dimensions and weights, you're adding a new carton, and the dimensions and weights for that new carton is correct, but the eachers are now wrong because they were incorrect to begin with. So before you could approve that new carton through, it's going to keep coming back with a hard error. This will prevent you from approving it. So before you can approve that, you're going to have to do a change request to correct the dimensions and weights on those eaches. So the most common errors when changing dimensions and weights. Creating the change, but forgetting to approve through the vendor role, and then calculating the cube incorrectly. Now, if you have each packages, each cartons, uniform cartons, and exploding assortment cartons, you can actually sync those over, getting tongue-tied, I'm sorry. You can sync those new dimensions and weights over from your data sync provider, so you don't have to go in and update them manually. If you have assorted cartons, mixed cartons, and pallet cartons, those cannot be synced over, and you do have to update them manually in IMA. Just as a reminder, anytime you sync over changes, you don't have to, that prevents you from having to enter them, but you still have to approve them in IMA. And those changes that have been synced over will always be found in your new item data catalog task list. All right, the dimension exception indicator. So I talked about this on Monday. If you have items that are nested or stacked or compressed, or if you're including a display shipper, you can mark the dimension exception indicator. What this means is that basically the dimensions for your carton are going to be completely off from the dimensions of your eaches. Because if you have chairs that you're stacking and you're nesting into each other, then the logic that we have set up in IMA won't make sense. Or if you have pillows that you're putting into a carton, they can be compressed. So that logic, again, it would not make sense. So then you can set up the dimension exception indicator. So if exemption rules apply and you need to update the dimension exception indicator on operational items, you can change it on the Packages tab for a single item, or if you have multiple items that you want to change it for, you can always use the changes grid and save yourself some time. So to update on a single item, you would do a quick search for your KSN, and you'd go to the Packages tab, and then you would select this box here next to Dimension Exception Indicator and click Create Change Request. So as a reminder, you only need to do these for eaches. You don't need to set the Dimension Exception Indicator for cartons. Once you click Create Change Request, it's going to load this page. You can select the different option down here. So in this case, if you're turning it on, you would select Yes. And then you're going to click Save and go to Next. It's going to load that workflow tab for you, and then you just have to approve and submit. If you're doing it through the Changes grid, it's the Change Existing Items, I believe, under Data Catalog. You would select the Dimension Exception Indicator here in the Section 1, and then you can enter the KSNs or the UPCs up here. If you have coordinated items, you can enter those here as well. Then you would click Create Grid, it's going to automatically have this filled up for you. You would just change the green highlighted field to yes, and then approve. So any questions about updating the dimensions and weights or setting the dimension exception indicator? All right, we're going to go into some key points then to review. If a carton configuration is incorrect, you must create a new carton with the correct configuration. A new carton always requires a new vendor pack. A new vendor pack does not necessarily require a new carton. It is best practice to sync over new cartons and vendor packs rather than creating them manually, although sometimes it is required. Before fixing an incorrect UPC, communicate with your buyer to determine whether the same KSN is required. And then finally, you must wait until an item is operational before you can select different ship points for different DCs. So if you remember Tuesday I mentioned when you're doing new item setup, and if you need different ship points, you can only select one initially, and then you would have to wait for it to be operational, and then you would do a change request to set different ship points for different DCs. So later today, or possibly tomorrow, I'll be sending out the video link as well as a request for a survey. I'd really appreciate if you would take some time to give me your feedback on this webinar series for IMA. It just takes a few minutes. It's not that long. But I would really appreciate to get your feedback. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And if you guys have any questions, please don't be afraid to speak up. You can also use the chat. If you don't want to speak up, then we can try doing it through that.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay. All right, so does anybody have any questions about anything we covered today or anything else? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and I will stay on the line for a little bit. So if you think of something a little bit later that you want to ask, I'll stay on the line for a while, and you can still ask me at that point. So I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you found this series to be helpful to setting up